Recording is on.
Cool. So this is the first Bitcoin crit, part of the Bitcoin design community. The kind of goal of this is to get projects or Bitcoin related projects on board and critique a certain segment of their product and give some user experience feedback around that certain segment. Traditionally, we had some design reviews and they would kind of overlook the whole product, but they were just a bit cumbersome and they're a bit over the place, and it's difficult to implement feedback when it's scattered all around a product and it's not really like focused. It's a bit easier to kind of focus on one particular thing and have things a bit more structured and stuff like that. So today we're going to be looking at VoltPay's KeyPad UX. So I've done a bit of a review, but I've got a Figma file here, which Michael, I think I shared it in the general chat. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Yep.
But,
Yep.
Obviously, you can go look at that and look back on any of the comments I made. I've tried to be as far as I can with the comments, so you can easily go through and look at where I've commented stuff. I'm not sure if commenting on things in the slides is the best way to communicate the feedback, but I just found it personally, like you can comment obviously on the very particular thing in the UI to say like, maybe improve this or change this. So that's kind of how I like doing it. But if you find it's not the best way, feel free to let me know and we can, kind of tweak that thing. I was just saying to Michael before this started that this is the first time we're kind of doing a Bitcoin crit, so we're still kind of working out, I guess, the best way to kind of go about this. But and sorry for talking like I'm in third person, by the way, Michael. It's just me and you. But yeah, just kind of going to post this on the Bitcoin Design YouTube. So yeah, cool. Let's get into it. So got a cover page here, got a crit file here. So just a bit of an overview of what I've done here. This top segment. So I just kind of took the screen states of the keypad of what we're going to be looking at. And I've just gone through the kind of flow and laid it out here in Figma. And I've just laid comments down where I think things could kind of be improved on a UI and UX point of view. There is some areas where I've just kind of made suggestions, like but they're just considerations. They're not like definites. I just kind of said, it'd be pretty cool to do something like that. But, obviously it's your product, Michael. You're more than welcome to do what you want. But just kind of some ideas I had while I was kind of going through it. Merchants isn't actually something I've had a lot of experience with. So it was actually quite fun kind of going through it and did a bit of research around, like Shopify's point of sale, Square's point of sale. And I think there was another one I looked at. I just stuck with 3 quite big ones. I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, they're all pretty standardized and have really similar UI patterns between them. So I kind of applied a lot of the logic from those towards my feedback that I'm giving. So going from the start here, I did do a little bit of feedback just on the onboarding initially. I wasn't supposed to do that. I was supposed to focus on the keypad, but I just opened it and I was like, there's a few little things here you could kind of improve. The first bit of feedback here is it would be good to just maybe have some kind of educational onboarding, like maybe just a few frames just to say what VoltPay is. It could be an optional thing, and you could also have the buttons, the create account, the call to actions, we call them, the create account and the login included in that, so they could go directly into the app without having to go for the onboarding. I linked an example here, which I'll just get up. I actually don't need to click on that link. If you see in the Square app, they have you made a landing page like this when you launch. You have your create account and you sign in. An important thing as well, if obviously they're a first-time user, you want the create account to be like a large filled-in call to action, because that's probably the main thing people are going to do when they first sign up. Sign in is going to be a secondary kind of action people will take. But yeah, as you can see, they got this kind of onboarding, but it's optional. You can obviously just click create account and skip through that. But that's just a nice thing to have to kind of reiterate what the app's about and kind of outline the problems that the kind of app will solve for the user. So that was the first bit of feedback there. This is just a random comment I made. I seen your post on Twitter about Volt, the Neon bank that shut down. They lost their license, and I just said, off topic, but it'd be cool to steal that name, Volt, just Volt instead of VoltPay. Sounds cool. But just a random thing I chucked in there. So going down to the input forms, just with forms, I think on the Android version you did have labels on them all. This was the Android version actually. Sorry, on the iOS version I think had labels, but the Android version didn't. Just to keep in mind, this is all iOS that I kind of went through, but I did look at the Android app as well, but they're pretty similar. So just the first thing here is you should put labels kind of above the input forms. The reason you do that is when you click email, like it removes the placeholder text, and then it kind of makes it not so clear what you're typing in, which might seem like a minor thing, but it just kind of adds a bit of like, I guess, additional help to guide the user as to what they're typing and make things a little bit easier. And that's beneficial, especially when you're doing like much larger forms. But that's just a pretty common practice to stick with. Second comment I made was just there is still quite a lot of negative space here that you could utilize. You could make these input forms slightly larger, which is good for accessibility. I think they're around 30 odd pixels now, but you could do something like 56 pixels. Sizes don't really matter, but yeah, it's a bit larger input forms to make use of some of this space, just to make it a bit easier to read. But there is some people that might have troubles clicking that, or they might have really small devices and the input forms may be really tiny. So just something to keep in mind. And it would just make visually the space kind of get filled up a little bit nicer. And you could make this logo a little bit bigger too. That's another comment, just to like have it like maybe a little bit higher as well, maybe up here a bit bigger. Button as well. The button could probably be bigger, make it the same width as the input form. This orange you're using is quite bright, so the white text can be a little bit, maybe not for us, but for some people who have like a bad vision, the contrast might be slightly off. I did a contrast test on it, and it was not a AA standard against the A11Y guidelines, which kind of just like outlines like the best kind of ways of accessibility UI. But that's just a minor thing. So you could just maybe make that slightly darker, or use a black, or use maybe, I'd probably suggest using just a little bit of a darker orange, because darker orange looks pretty good with the white text. Yeah, you can make that a bit bigger, probably make it the same width and length as the input form size you use, just so it looks all uniform and clean and kind of fits together. Another comment, I think this orange, I'm not sure if it was just maybe my eyes were off on the screen, but the orange looks slightly different from this orange, just to be consistent with like styling. It's good to just stick with your primary orange you're going to use. So just like you could change these to orange. But that's just a very minor thing. That's not something that is really a big glaring issue. Going over, I think I just suggested, add labels as well here. I suggested to add a back button up here. Even though you can click login, it would be handy to just have a back button if you wanted to just go back to this page. Just another action users could take. As well, like with this point here, you could just say name, and then it's a bit more generic, and I think that can cater to individuals who maybe don't have a business. Because if you say your business, it could kind of make users think, oh, like this VoltPay requires me to have a proprietary limited business, and it could like confuse them a little bit. So just saying name, I think, is like a generic term, and they'll be like, okay, well, I'm using this app for me, or I'm using it for my business, so they'll probably input the name that's relevant for their use case. So that's just another tidbit there. But yeah, this is just the same comment here about the button, making it a bit larger as well as the text. All of this is elaborated. If you go to these on Figma and go Shift-C, like you can go like that and bring these comments up, and you click on them, you can see the bit more expanded text where I kind of explain all this. So feel free to just go back if you want to kind of go back on any of this feedback I'm giving.
Okay.
Just another minor thing as well, like when I was typing in my password initially here, it instantly gave me this error message.
Straight away.
Yeah, so it'd be good to have the error message only apply once it's incorrect when you're typing it in the confirm password state. Just a very minor thing, but it's just like, obviously it makes the user think they've done something wrong if they're typing something in here, which like, technically they haven't yet, but they could. And as well, it'd also be good to maybe just put a red outline around the box like this box, just to kind of indicate that they typed that in wrong, because in most cases it's the confirm password that they were typing wrong. But yeah, that's just a minor thing. And also having maybe a toggle, like an eye. I didn't put that down as a comment, but having it just a toggle, so just make it visible or hidden, just for a little bit of a privacy thing, but not a major thing. Back button as well, that was the same screen, so didn't put a comment there for that. So now we're getting to the keypads. This is the main thing that we kind of wanted to focus on. Did you have any comments about that onboarding phase, by the way?
No, yeah, it's all good. Straightforward stuff, and it makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. So the main thing landing on the keypad, I think like visually there's kind of a lot of stuff going on. I think it's maybe a little bit hard to decipher like where exactly to focus your attention, what action to take next. I really like the tour. I think that's a really great addition. I think more apps should do that. I always suggest that to people, as having a little onboarding wizard type thing for people to play around with is very beneficial. I think a bit of a better way to do it, rather than utilizing all this space down here, which you could use for the number pad to make this a bit easier to use, is when they go from this phase and they click create account and they go to here, you could have just like a little modal pop up, which says like, you successfully created your account. Do you want to take a tour? And then there'll just be like a option to saying no or yes, or take the tour or no. And then they can click take the tour or skip it, and they can just go back into this screen. That way you don't need to have this pop up, and you can just avoid having that. And also having the feedback on that you successfully created an account is also like something good to have, so you can kind of piece those two things together quite nicely there. So going from the top down up here, I think you could significantly reduce the size of this cart. It takes up quite a lot of visual space. And I think you can communicate the same thing you're trying to communicate here in a much smaller manner. I do have a little bit of a redesign that I did. It's not nothing like fully high fidelity. I'd say it's pretty low fidelity, but I have a bit of a redesign where I kind of just give some examples of what I mean by that, because I think it's a bit easier to visually explain that rather than just talk about it.
Yep.
But yeah, it takes quite a lot of the visual real estate as well. This is the primary action users should be taking after they type something in. So it is a bit easier when you have buttons down the bottom of the screen, because think about it, when you're like holding a phone, it's a bit easy to tap stuff down the bottom. And when I was thinking about how merchants, particularly in like a farmer's market type situation, would want to accept a payment, particularly if they're accepting multiple payments regularly, they'd want a speed would be something they'd want to do. They'd want to make sure they can conduct these payments fast. So making these actions as quick as possible to take is ideal in my mind. I may be wrong in that assumption, but that's kind of where my head's at. Like I'd assume merchants would want to be able to fill their card up quick and generate the invoice as fast as possible.
Yeah,
so that's kind of where my head's at with that. I kind of explained that in a lot of these comments here, but you can go back and have a little bit more of an in-depth read. As well, that's just the same comment I said there. Like when you want to make a note that's a bit far away, like if you're typing in a number pad and you have to reach all the way up here, it would be better to have these actions down here. And there is all this space, like, which is awesome, where you can play around with and use. The number pad is quite high. I just mentioned there, like it's a bit higher up on the screen. Like I said before, reaching up makes the action take those few milliseconds longer, which might not sound like much, but if, say for example, if you did like a couple hundred payments a day or something in a store, like those kind of things add up, and it makes the whole experience just feel that little bit more seamless and kind of clean when it's easy to do. Another thing as well is like, because this is in a primary active state, it looks like that's kind of what draws people. That's probably the main thing when you land on the screen. Your eyes get drawn to that orange button, which in its current state, you don't really utilize that button, because obviously you need to input an amount and then you would press the button. So if you do want to have a button, you want it to be disabled, like maybe just lower the opacity by like 50% and just have it in a disabled state, still have it orange. Similar to like kind of what's here, like it's like a disabled kind of faded way, but you want that to be orange so it doesn't like drag people to that attention. You've kind of got here, like these would be the actions you were kind of driving people to take. You'd probably want to like drive them to do those. But like I said, the tour may be better with a pop-up, and then the lightning address, maybe if that's something you want people to do straight away, you can draw more attention to that with like a larger button or some kind of like more colorful kind of way. I did make a comment on the lightning address. So with lightning addresses, I kind of made the suggestion that it might be better to move that into the settings to set up, or set it up as part of that onboarding flow. Because I think like lightning address is awesome. I think that would be like a great thing. Like you could set up your account, like enter your name, your email, password, and the next screen have like a phase that just says, here's lightning addresses, and maybe just give a little bit of explanation as to what it is. Which is important too, because at this stage you land on this screen, it says you haven't set up your lightning address, set it up now. And to a user who doesn't know what that is, they'll be like, oh, like why would I set it up now? There's no benefits being conveyed to them as to why they would want to do that. Whereas when you do that in the onboarding, there's a lot more space to add a bit of copy to explain like what the lightning address is, explain the benefits, and suggest you can, it's a human readable way, like all that kind of stuff. It's a bit easier to convey that with all this extra screen space. And obviously you can give them the option to skip it if they don't want to do that. But you could alternatively like make this business name input only work. Like it just that just automatically becomes a lightning address for the user. So like you don't even like I don't know. I know you talked about neobanks in on Twitter today. I don't know if you've used Up before, but when you sign up to Up, it just automatically registers you like a Pay ID with your username that you
Yep.
set,
Okay. Yeah.
which is a really cool feature. Like you jump into the Up app and you've got a Pay ID straight away. You don't have to set it up at all. It's just there and it's set up, and you don't have to worry about it. And it's pretty clear like what it means. And I think that's personally a good way to go about it. But something to keep in mind there. What else did I do this? I just mentioned the space. And the big thing I mentioned about this product, this is probably the biggest change that I'm suggesting, and it's kind of leaning towards like a bit of a feature change, which I kind of wanted to stray away from with doing these critiques, is I think with this keypad, the keypad and the products should be intertwined within the same frame, because they're both very similar actions that the user's taking. They're either entering it, input an amount for like a custom sale, or they're selecting a product from a predefined list. And I think they should be within the same frame. And in the redesign, I kind of go over that, so I can explain that a little bit more kind of when I get there. With the Lightning address as well, I think it's a LN Pay. I didn't actually go too in depth on the tip stuff, but I think the tips would be like if they set up that Lightning address on the onboarding, the tips would be great just to have as a Lightning address QR code. Which you could use LN Pay as well. Like either's fine, but I just suggested that as well. Like when they set that up, you could just use the LN address, and it does make a slightly smaller QR code and stuff like that, which can make things a bit easy to scan and stuff like that. This is just a minor nit as well, not a big thing, but these two icons are reasonably similar. You do want some like visual distinction between things. Like maybe not to us, but some people may visually see them in the same thing, especially if you kind of zoom out. They both look very similar. So in the redesign I just use a different icon for the products, and I actually no, I use the same icon for the products, sorry, and just like a cog for the more, which is kind of like the settings where you can kind of go dive into that stuff. So the tour, I didn't really have much comments on. I reckon the tour was really good. There was one thing I just was using the green. I reckon I'd stick with using your primary orange, just to consistent with colors. So just use like the orange. But yeah, I think the onboarding was great. It was pretty to the point. Explained exactly what needs to be done. One thing you could do is when it kind of when you have these number pads pop up like this, you could like put a highlight around them just to make it stand out a little bit more from these lower opacity areas. So
it does do that in light mode, but it's just not showing up in the dark mode for some reason. So yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah. That's good. You got that in mind then. Yeah. So yeah, that's just a minor thing. Like it does stand out a little bit more. Like I can tell it's not as like low opacity as these, but it just didn't stand out, I guess, as much. But yeah, that's just a minor thing there. All the copy I thought was really good. It explained what it is. There was one thing here, optionally give you custom item a label. Maybe because I'd say it's more of a note or a message or a thing, something like that. There is a distinction, like a label is more of a name you give something, notes a bit different, but we can kind of get into the details of that stuff when we a little bit further up. But yeah, the onboard, the help wizard or whatever you'd call it is great. I didn't have any comments there, and it made a lot of sense. So just scrolling through that, I didn't really make much comments there at all. And then you're going back here, so you got the logo pop up, and that's gone away. The next thing I did, just because I wanted to kind of get rid of this to see if the pad would change in any way. So I wasn't initially going to look into that, but I clicked on Setup Now. And I was a little bit confused when I came to this page. There's just one minor nit here. I'd make that white just to keep it consistent with color styling and stuff like that. I wasn't too sure. I wanted to actually ask you, like, is there a reason like it has a change password there for the Lightning address when you click on that?
Yeah, I mean, not really. Like that's just a general account screen, and I've kind of added the Lightning address in there as an afterthought. So it sort of really needs its own screen or something when you're setting up the Lightning.
Yeah, that's pretty much the comments I've made throughout here. And I made a comment saying, this should say Lightning address, or creating a Lightning address, and like this should be. You could just have, obviously, like you said, its own unique screen. You just have one input form that says input a Lightning address, and then have pretty much a form that just is like this. And have this here, and then obviously have like a call to action, and instead of using the blue good to stick with the orange, like your primary color that you use throughout, and just have this say like a create lightning address or something along those lines, just so the user knows what action they're taking. And then once you had that, you could remove the save up button up here. But yeah, that was good. Like set the lightning address, gave me verification to say that Bosch is free, which is good. But yeah, I do still think like on the onboarding would be a great way to do that. No apps do that except Zebedee, and I think Zebedee's got some really good like UI UX practices, which I think more apps should abide by. But that's just that's something to add. But awesome that you got lightning addresses, by the way. Like it's more apps need to have that. Cool. So going back here, this is the same comment I kind of made earlier on about. I didn't really kind of elaborate on it, I guess, but it was around the point that a lightning address and making a request from a cart, whether you enter it from a number pad or a product list, to me are very distinct kind of payment flows. A lightning address is more related to like, I guess, something you'd share with someone that then they would send recurring payments, or you would use it to like get tips. So I kind of made a comment there that maybe that instead of having the lightning address here, you could show it in the balance page. If you've used Up before, like they have like on their balance page, you have your balance at the top, and then just underneath the balance is like your pay ID. You could do the same thing like that on the balance page. You have your balance at the top, and then just underneath it, your pay ID. As well, in the tips page, you could have just like a QR code of your lightning address used there. So that's just one comment I made. I think those kind of flows are very distinct things. So I wasn't too sure if they paired well together in that scenario. But that's the only comment I made there after I made the lightning address. And I was expecting after setting up these two things that the pad was going to move down for some reason. I just thought they were there as like kind of notifications, but it did stay like this. And in the redesign, I've kind of made it a bit more spacious and made the pad a bit larger and the numbers a bit larger. One thing as well, this was something that it's pretty common that people set up, but when you toggle between different amounts, it should zero out. Some people would say don't do that, but I think it's very important with Bitcoin because, for example, if you type in 21,000 sats and then I click toggle on the sats, it switches to 21,000 Bitcoin or $21,000. So it stays in that denomination. So it's good to clear it if the user taps the number to change the denomination. It should just send it back to zero. Otherwise, they could accidentally press, request 21,000 Bitcoin. It accidentally slipped and pressed that, and then requesting a ridiculously large amount or something like that. That's just a minor thing as well. Just zero that out. Another thing as well, I didn't actually make a comment on it, would be just to lower the opacity of this zero entered amount. It's just something I like to do to show that there's nothing entered. So similar to how you have forms and you have like placeholders in a lower opacity, just have that in a lowest opacity. I have all this explained a bit more in the redesign, but we'll get there in a minute. So next thing was adding a note. So I typed 21,000, tapped on note. When I got to this page, the first thing I wanted to do was go back because I was just kind of playing around with it and there was no back button. So that's just one thing to add. It's a back button. Similar to comments that I made about the buttons before, maybe make these larger, make it orange, make these larger too, make sure these are in line with the buttons here, which just makes things look visually kind of consistent. Well, I don't know if it was my phone, but like some of these forms as well, they were pretty dark. Like these two colors, as you can see, are pretty close. So for some people who are a little bit more visually impaired, maybe not be able to see that, like especially if you kind of zoomed out. If you zoom out like that, it's kind of it's a bit hard if they're like holding the phone away. So especially if you're in a merchant situation, you could be in different lighting conditions and stuff like that. So it may be a bit harder to see. So maybe just also increasing the color of that. I'll add another comment about that at the start around forms. So then it goes to this and it has like, I've added my note, which is cool. I've had my amount, press tap, which is good. I mentioned before about making that grayed out if there's no amount entered, but that's a comment on the previous things. Then you got your cart, which looks good. It's all filled in. I didn't really make too much comments around here. I tried to clear my cart, just again around making that the primary orange, maybe making those buttons a bit larger as well. I like that you've put this at the bottom of the screen. Like I was mentioning before, it's good to have those things towards the bottom just to make it a bit easier, just streamline things, make it a bit quicker. Most people we'll get to another point as well. It's like you can utilize the bottom right a bit more for people because majority of people are right-handed, so it's easy to use that. And you can make things left-handed if you want, but like, yeah, that's a whole kind of can of worms that we won't kind of get into. So now I'm going to click cart. So I didn't clear the cart here, by the way. I just want to see what that looked like. So click cart, go to this screen. The main comment I had on this screen, cancel's good, shopping cart. I made a few other comments on the redesign, but get to that in a bit. But shopping cart sounds like you're more of the user, the person who's controlling the app is checking out and buying something. Whereas like it's probably a bit more of like a in the redesign, I just said review sale as the button. So like you could say like review sale or something rather than shopping cart, because that kind of sounds like they're buying something rather than them charging someone else. The second point kind of relates to that, and that's around this kind of pay button, because that's kind of speaking more towards what the buyer is doing rather than the merchant. The merchant's the one taking that action, so it should be, the copy should relate to what action they're taking. So it should say something more like generate invoice or request payment rather than pay, because the merchant's not paying them, the user's paying them. So that's just a minor thing there. I liked all this. You can add image. I didn't really go into detail too much of this because, as I said, I was kind of just mainly focusing on the number pad. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I think this button would be much better like down the bottom here. You've got a lot of screen real estate, way easier to click if it was down the bottom. And then add tip, I really liked. I think I added a few other suggestions. So you can make that a orange outline button as a secondary button, or you can just have it as maybe I was thinking you could utilize this top bar and have like a little icon. So this is like a tip icon, and you can click that, and it just pop up like a modal or something, and then you can type in. And something as well added was like a discount. It'd be a cool feature to have. I didn't want to get into like suggested features, but I just noticed a lot of apps have that kind of stuff. Like let's say if some users like, like I don't know, there may be situations where they have a coupon card or something and it's 10%. They can just quickly type in 10% discount, and it just takes 10% off the total amount, which would be something cool to have. This is just another one as well. Don't mind the feature suggestions. It's just me thinking about stuff, and I thought that'd be pretty cool. We're actually building a whole reference design, by the way, in the Bitcoin design guide around merchants. So keep an eye out for that. But there's a merchants kickoff call next week sometime. I'll send you the link for it after. But pretty much going to build a whole reference design that goes into all the UI UX around the exact app that VoltPay is, which is really cool. Because I told a few people to come join tonight, because there's a few people who are going to be working on that will probably be interested, but I'm not too sure. I'm assuming they'd be asleep.
I'll try and join in then. Sounds interesting.
I think it's pretty late because it's like 11 o'clock my time, so like 1 a.m. for you, but it's like that with American, Another thing that would be cool that you can kind of do with Lightning is like a split bill feature. I don't know, there's probably a little bit of complexity on the dev side to do that, but it would be cool to have something if you could type it in and split it, and maybe it would generate like a couple invoices, and then you could split it through. But I'm sure that's something you may have thought of, but I just kind of was thinking that this would be a situation where you'd kind of do that, something cool to do. Because I know in the traditional world, that's a huge problem, is splitting bill for being someone who works as a merchant who's accepting a payment. It's a pain in the ass. So, and Bitcoin can kind of avoid that friction by just generating multiple invoices. So the first thing on the invoice page, again, I didn't go too in depth on this because I wanted to focus on the KeyPad stuff. I did want to ask you, is this timer at the top here, is that for the expiration for the invoice? I wasn't too sure.
It's not. I just kind of put it in there because I wanted to show that it was waiting. But it's not really linked to expiry or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Like, I don't mind that. The bar at the top, again, just with colors, I'd maybe just stick with like the orange, just to stick with the consistency of around the app. But yeah, like having a good feedback timer like that is good. You could also, just other suggestions, use just like a little swirl toggle or something like that. I know like BTC Pay and services like that use those kinds of things. Another thing as well, this is just a marketing kind of thing, but you could put your logo in the middle. It's just a bit of a branding exercise. So people help your app get out there a little bit more. I would make these buttons slightly larger. I'll show you, I don't know if I've mentioned it to you, but I work on Zeus, which is like the Lightning wallet. And this is kind of like what our invoice page looks like. And like the buttons kind of fit and they align with the invoice like on the side, so it's like consistent. I don't know, put it up here, but and they're just a bit bigger and kind of fill the space. That just, like I said, like the same thing I've been mentioning, it just makes things like just a little bit easier to kind of click. I love that you got NFC button, by the way. That's awesome. Like there's not many apps that have it, so really good to see that. You don't have it on Android yet, but I think
yeah, it's not actually released for any of them. I think because you're on the test flight version, so it's not out there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because I was reading the website and it said it was coming soon. I was like, oh, I've got it here. But yeah, I only had my testnet Zeus node on me today. Otherwise, I would have tried to do a payment with it. But yeah, it's really good. You could add some copy here as well, just to say that. I know in this situation, a lot of people are like, so they're doing the payment with this kind of UI from like their iPhone, whereas like in this situation, they're receiving. So like, you could say ready to receive or tap to share the invoice, because that's essentially I'm pretty sure that's what's happening in this situation. The invoice is being shared over NFC to the other user's phone, and they just pay it. But yeah, that's really cool. I really like that feature. Like I really like VoltPay as a awesome app with I think a lot of potential. So how long have you been working on it, by the way? I wanted to ask some general questions about it.
I started in December, so it's really only like
cool.
6 months ish.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, I really like it. I like to see. I did make a suggestion somewhere around here. I think about I said a random idea. You could like connect it with BTC Pay, and it could be like a great companion app to use with BTC Pay. I did see you mentioned on your website that you're going to have a non-custodial option in the future, which is really cool. I'm really big on that kind of stuff with Bitcoin, but yeah, that's a good option. So cool. So that's the feedback kind of portion of the design crit. Do you have any questions? You like anything you want to bring up? Like any feedback? Like completely open to anything. Like this is the first time doing this, so I may have botched things in certain areas. So just let me know.
Yeah. I mean, all of your suggestions make total sense. You know, I'm on board with everything you've said, basically. I don't think I really have any criticism. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, also, by the way, like I'm more than happy to follow up with these kinds of things. Like it's not like I'm just going to dump all this feedback on you and then you're going to just like hopefully do it. Like I'm always going to be around, so just feel free to message me to clarify things, talk about things further in depth. Even if you get to the phase and you implement this kind of stuff and you want me to just like download a test flight version and just have a quick look, I'm more than happy to. So just keep in touch and we can talk about that kind of stuff. So cool. I got the KeyPad redesign here. I added a link here for a prototype. So this is just a static version, but I did do like just a very minor prototype in Figma. I could have easily got carried away doing this for hours, but I did want to keep these crits quite small, so I did kind of just keep it very like specific on a few things. There's a lot of my feedbacks kind of intertwined with this kind of UI that I've done, but I'll go to the prototype because I think it'll be a bit easier to illustrate it like with that. So this is a start. This is kind of like a bit of a different UI for homepage landing thing. I went with the rounded buttons. I find they're a bit nicer to click. That's just maybe a personal preference of mine, but I kind of like rounded things. I made the copy just a little bit larger. It just makes it a bit easier to click. Similar to kind of what I've been mentioned over and over about making things quicker and faster, and when things are larger and easier to see, and there is all this extra real estate we can play around with on the screen. So why not? Why not make them a little bit larger? Made them nice and spacious as well, like between them, so they're not going to overlap with clicking. And it has a very similar pattern to everything from iPhone number pads to calculators to iPhone dialings, which when it comes to kind of UX stuff, familiarity makes things a lot easier to use. I know a lot of number pads use the more square version, like what you've got. I know like you got Breeze, they got like the square version here, the items, and they got the square version as well with square, which is pretty cool. But both are fine. Like the number pad thing, like that's just more of a visual thing. Like that's definitely something more for you to decide. Like it's not really me saying like each way's better. It's more for how things look. But definitely the main takeaway is just making more use of the kind of screen real estate and playing around with that, because at the moment there's a lot of gaps. So going from the top down. So for what I said before about how you had that modal pop up and you could click like start tour or skip. If you did choose to skip the tour, I would think it would be handy to still have like an icon up here just in case you wanted
So
to
they
click.
can get back to it. Yep.
Yeah, and get back to the tour. Just if they get here and they're like, "What the fuck's all this mean?" They sorry, I swear then. What's all this mean? And they can click on that and look through go through the tutorial again and get explanations for it all. Made the number just a bit larger. I like to have the toggle underneath, especially when you're dealing with like Bitcoin and Sats. Some of the numbers can get quite big, so you want to make as much use of this like horizontal space as possible. So I generally just in a general sense of when I'm designing any kind of Bitcoin wallet-based app, I like to put the toggle underneath. And I just had the toggle with Sats here as an example. I think I hooked it up a bit later. We'll get to that. But yeah, so this makes it kind of see that it's Sats you're entering here. You got 0. It's a bit grayed out, like I mentioned before. It's like a lower opacity, and when you type a number in, it will go white to show that something's numbered in. Like I mentioned before, gray out the button, and I had just add item because you want the call to action to be the action people are taking. So, like before, you just had the add button, which actually, sorry, I actually made a mistake there, but that plus isn't supposed to be there, but that plus should probably be a bot. I'd say particularly for Sats and maybe US dollars. Maybe they want to do like fractional for Bitcoin as well. They might want to do dots like it's cents for fiat currencies. So just don't mind that. That's my mistake. I'll fix that up after because traditionally the ad was there and you wanted to do that.
Yep.
So yeah, you got that low opacity. You have the different call to action copy, which says add item, which really kind of indicates to the user like what the action they're taking. And something I was playing around with that I didn't see any other apps use, I think it's pretty cool, is having the products menu right here. Like I mentioned before, I think having the product intertwined with the keypad is pretty important. You can see that like with Square and Breeze. Breeze, this was a bit higher up. I wanted to make it a bit lower. So I've added this extra button here. So this is to get to the products. And I use that same product kind of icon you use. By the way, these icons I use all from Font Awesome. So like it should be, except the Bitcoin one, but I think that's a pretty generic one you can get from most places.
Yep.
When you click on this, I didn't do the UI for it, but it just toggles between the two states. So
Cool.
you go this state, this would be all your products, and you can have all your products listed and have a button like maybe an icon up here that says like add an item. You can add new stuff, but you've already got some UI around that, so you can just kind of like plug that in here, and then like you can just go add, and it just adds it to the thing, and then you can toggle back to the keypad, add your numbers, add items from the keypad as well, and then I'll get to the next bits when it does that. Just going down to the menu at the bottom. So for the settings, I just changed the settings to a cog, just so like I said before, because the product icon and the original settings icon or the more icon was pretty similar. So I just kind of did different ones to make that distinction, but there's no other changes made in any of these other things. Got the tip icon, which is good. I just used the Bitcoin icon for the balance. The one thing with the balance that I think wasn't super clear, and I did make a comment on that, which I didn't elaborate on, is like, just quickly go back to that, is like with the balance page is also like your transactions page or your activity page. So balance isn't exactly the whole picture. So I kind of just use the Bitcoin icon because it kind of just indicates like this is where your Bitcoin is, where the activity is, just to make it a bit more symbolic to that. I remove the copy, having the copy, the labels, sorry, not the copy. The labels, like, I think that's just more of a personal preference. Like, I think the labels are fine. I don't think they're an issue. It does make things a little bit more clearer, but icons generally are visually, and they like once they kind of use it once or twice, they'll be pretty clear what they are. And like this icon is obviously symbolic, as you don't need a label for that because everyone knows really what that is. This one may be a bit unclear. This one, these three may be a little bit unclear. This one's probably kind of clear, but yeah, I use the cashier icon, which is a Font Awesome one. This is that. I put it at the bottom right as well, just because it's easier to click. So that's the primary area of the app people are going to be using. Most people are right-handed, like I said earlier, so you want that in the bottom right. So it's just really easy and really quick to get to, no matter where you are in the app. So it just makes like taking those actions and getting a payment just that few milliseconds faster for people. So it makes the whole process a bit nicer. So yeah, you got that, the toggle, the keypad, the Font Awesome icon as well. And I just hooked up a very minor kind of flow with adding an amount. So you'd click like 9 and it would pop up with a number like that. This button highlights. And the third thing, which I thought was interesting too, is this icon. Once you've typed in a number, you can't toggle over to the products page without clearing it, and this turns into a note option. So you type it in, and that way, like I said before, like even Square and Breeze, the note options are really high up, and that's something you probably want to do quickly. So you'd have this in this bottom right, so you can easily tap that, add a note quite fast instead of having to stretch your fingers around and stuff like that. I'm just trying to think of all those little micro interactions people make to make it that little bit faster. So that kind of pops up, and you click that and add a note, and you've kind of got that like UI stuff. I didn't really go into that. I just kind of said focus on the keypad, like I said. So yeah, you got the note you can add there. So you got the 9 added in. Just one thing quickly, actually, before I click add, I did hook up this toggle here, and this is what I was talking before about when you change the denominations, how it should zero out. So I did a little example here when you like click that, and it goes like USD, and it just toggles that out, it puts this back to its disabled state. So that's just kind of what I was trying to communicate before, but it's just a minor little thing.
Yeah.
So cool, go back to that. So how did you add item? You go like add, maybe I added a note. One thing I didn't do in this design is when you add a note, I'd probably maybe have like maybe some kind of indication that a note's added when you added one, some kind of other state, like maybe you could add a label here, or maybe you could fill in the icon and make it filled in white or something like that. But that's something that also need to be done that I didn't do in this little mock-up here. So you go add item, and once you click add item, I think the copy would be good to like change to like review sale. It should say how much stuff's in your cart, because that's the action people are taking, rather than obviously say add item still, because even though you can add more items, the next kind of call to action is review sale. But you can kind of click that, go to the products list, which I didn't hook up by the way, but like how that would kind of work is you go 9, add item, and you could go to the products list, add another product, and it will just go review sale 2. And then yeah, you click review sale, and I didn't do the hookup the other UI for the review sale. Just kind of stayed focused on the keypad, which you can see here. This is kind of the prototype that I have there. And if you want to view that prototype, yeah, just click. I'll put a link there so you can click that and play around with it. But, and I also put the scaling because I did this in Zeus. So these are the scaling to use just so it stays nice on the screen. So you'd start with like 80 pixels to, and then there, just like as the denominations kind of get larger, you want the numbers to get a little bit smaller, just because otherwise obviously it takes up too much space. But just chuck that in there too for you if you wanted to go with that suggestion. Obviously these are just all suggestions, like you can play around and do things however you want, but yeah, that's kind of the little bit of a redesign I did. Not full-fledged, didn't go too in depth, but yeah, what do you think about that? Any like feedback or?
It's really interesting. I'm actually left-handed, and so with you saying a lot of these things, I can see like subconsciously I must have just done some things based on myself. Whereas most people are right-handed. But yeah, I really like a lot of these ideas. It's probably going to make it a whole lot easier to use.
Yeah, like feel free to hit me up if you feel like implementing this. I can go a bit more in depth and play around with things a bit more. Like I didn't spend a huge amount of time on this, even though I wanted to. I was sitting here today, I was like actually like really enjoying kind of playing around with this stuff. But you could even have like an option in the settings, like accessibility option that toggles between like left-handed and right-handed
left
mode.
And right. Yeah.
And you could just have that move like that. So like left-handed and have like that icon be like there instead. So like you could have a little accessibility toggle like that. I've seen some apps do that before. But yeah, that's a cool little thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole crit in a nutshell. Like I do have a workspace folder in this Figma. If you go on the left-hand side of the Figma, there's like just a workspace. Like there's not really a lot in here, but it's just kind of like where I just dumped a few random like inspirations and played around with a few other things. Like because initially I was kind of looking at a top toggle, but then I was like, oh, I don't know if I need to take up all that space, and it would be kind of good to just keep this top area focused on the input amount because that's the kind of main focus. And yeah, but yeah, that's
I think the way you've done it, like everything that you need to touch apart from the numbers is like down the bottom, so it's probably it's going to work a lot smoother.
Yeah, well, that's definitely my assumption with merchants. Like, especially like if you're in a busy like shop and you're walking around, like being a waiter and you're like taking all these payments, you want those micro interactions start to matter a lot more when you're in like a high-paced environment. So all those little things kind of add up, and it makes it that little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Another thing that would be cool to explore as well could be like, say if you set up someone's cart, say if you're taking a payment from someone and then they were like and around or something and you had their cart ready, but then like you're like, oh, I'm going to go accept this other person's payment quickly, but while you sort your stuff out, it'd be cool if you could like save the cart. So say
Yeah.
you were here and you could save this cart and then you could go back, set up another cart, do a payment with someone, and then come back to the other person once they're ready, open their cart that you had saved to make the payment. Obviously, you wouldn't want to have that cart sitting there for ages because maybe the price could fluctuate in those times. But I'm sure in like real world scenarios where you'd mostly be using VoltPay, that wouldn't matter a whole lot.
Mm.
But yeah, like any feedback or hopefully it went all good. Like I'm not too sure. Like this is the first one, so looking to do a lot of these over the next 5 or so months. So try to do one a week. But yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like, I mean, I'm going to get so much value out of this, and therefore hopefully the users will as well.
Yeah.
It's all of your suggestions. Like, there's nothing that I completely disagreed with or anything like that. So there's a lot of value in there.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's really
Well,
good.
that's good. Usually there's a lot of contention sometimes with these kind of things because I tried to really stray away from like obviously I stayed with your same color palette and color styles you used, orange the same. So they're the kind of more personal preference kinds of things that
Yeah.
try to stray away from because they're the stuff that is usually a bit more contentious to kind of discuss. But yeah.
So if you had to pick another color, what would you pick?
For the background or the orange?
For the orange.
I don't know. It's like it's something that I like would more be like that because I'd be like you'd want to more go through a big branding exercise and look at your
Yeah.
logo and your brand and
Yeah.
your website and then you'd kind of tie in with that color. But personally, like merchant, I don't know. I always think for some reason maybe it's because I play around with Square a lot. Is blue. I don't know why. Blue just seems to pop in my mind. I do like orange, but I do feel like it is a little bit overused in Bitcoin apps. But
Yeah.
I think orange and black is a nice aesthetic.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not someone who uses like uh, black. Usually, I'll like go with like a bit more of a like a like slightly off black like that, which might not look much different, but I kind of like those slightly off colors. That's just a personal preference on color regarding that. But no, I reckon orange looks good on the black. Like it stands out. Like you can see when the button's highlighted, like it really pops. Like it's very draws your eyes to it, which is what those call to action buttons should do. But I did these 56 pixels, by the way, like I mentioned before, which you could do the forms and the buttons 56 pixels. I do everything by a 8-point grid, which is just a convention that a lot of like UX UI designers kind of roll with. It's for various reasons. Like I think a majority of screen resolutions are like divisible by 8, so it's a lot easier to like scale things up and down, as well as like there's a whole bunch of other like mathematical reasons as well that people use 8-point grids and stuff like that. But you can see there, like I do like shift and I have like a grid, and these are all like in 8 points, and it's all like symmetrical with the grid, except the keys. But yeah, they felt weird when they were over on right on the far edge. But
yeah, bit too spaced out probably.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much the end of the crit. It's pretty much been an hour, which is the time I kind of allocated for the crit. And yeah, I guess thanks heaps for being the first person to kind of. I'll just stop sharing my screen, by the way, so you can see my face. But thanks for being the first person to come and do one of these crits. Really looking to do these quite a lot and get quite involved with them, and maybe eventually like compile them all into like a small little mini case studies kind of section in the design guide for other designers to look at. Hence why I was talking about this stuff in like a third person at the start, because like this is not just beneficial for you, it's also beneficial for like us, and we're going to use this information to build better products. And that's why I want as much feedback as possible from you as well, because like obviously not going to be 100% right about everything, so it's good to really iron all this stuff out. And it's great that we've done a merchant product straight off the bat because, yeah, I'm going to be working on a merchant section in the guide in the next coming months quite a bit. So it's nice to be starting to think about this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's awesome.
I think I'll be using your resources a whole lot more over the next coming months then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a design guide. There's like the UI kit, which Christoph has, which is just like drag and drop kind of templates you can kind of play off with. The design guide is mostly designed around that UI kit, so it's all like in kind of unison. And also feel free to make suggestions. Like all our design guides are on GitHub and stuff like that. And if something doesn't make sense, because you guys are the kind of guys we're building these guides for, people who are building products. So if something doesn't make sense, yeah, just open an issue and we'll happily address it as quickly as possible. So try to make it a useful resource for people like yourself. So
yeah, I've spent a bit of time trawling through some of the stuff that you've got, but definitely not as much as I should have. But yeah, it's really good stuff that's there. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's sort of like there's not a lot of like general design principles outlined in there because it is, I guess, a little bit more catered to like the product designers who are building products. But there's a little bit of that. It's definitely more focused on just like the nuances of Bitcoin related product design aspects, like how to present a QR code or something like that, or how to present certain data points and things like that. But yeah, I'm glad you've found it useful so far, and yeah, feel free to give us any feedback once you're going through it.
Cool, sounds good. Well, yeah, I really appreciate your time, and it's been very valuable, and I'm pretty sure I'll be in touch.
Cool. So you got the Figma file. I'll send you the recording when this is done. Like, feel free to go through the recording as well after. It'll be uploaded on YouTube if you're okay with that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, we'll put it on the Bitcoin Design YouTube and use it as a resource because
Cool. Sweet.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you get to bed because I know it's pretty late over in Sydney. Sorry for keeping you up, but thanks a lot.
No worries. Thank you.
Catch you later, Michael.
See ya.